Some homes are built with walls, and some are built with memories. For over 150 years, Bungalow has stood like a living time capsule, quietly watching time pass, gently holding stories within its timeless embrace. Ah, if those walls could speak, imagine the tales they would tell. Once, two young boys wandered through these corridors, laughing, exploring, and unknowingly creating memories that would stay with them for a lifetime. And today, they return to Wild Mahseer, where history is your host, not just as guests, but as souls returning to a place where their childhood still lives.
Well, for me, it's my parents being sat here on this very veranda, literally where you are now, every afternoon about probably 5 o'clock, after my father had come back from being in the tea estate, and having afternoon tea and perhaps some beer or something, and all of us as a family sat here just having a chat on this veranda, which is basically exactly the same as it was. It was actually my parents that laid these tiles on the floor back in 1968, 1969 I think. So that's my first memory.
I think when my parents and we were sitting on this veranda, which is basically exactly the same, in the evenings it's always the sounds of the jungle, the music, and also I remember the smells. I think smells are a very strong thing, because one of the staff would always come round with flit when we were sitting here to control the mosquitoes, and they'd have a pump. And I always remember I used to love the smell of the flit being sprayed all around the whole bungalow.
Yes, to control the mosquitoes, yes.
Which was, and coming in when we first arrived, the gardens haven't really changed. There's been a few differences in the way the cars came, but the memory of our old Hindustan ambassador driving into the porch and then climbing up the stairs, and we used to keep the bikes in that side of the veranda, bicycles. So.
And actually, there's an old American, Willie's Jeep out there, which is virtually identical to the one my father had, and my brother and I were both taught to drive on a Jeep just like that, aged very young, driving around this very estate. So it's full of memories for us. I think it's all of those things. For us it was our whole world, because we were both born in India, we were both in the tea industry for almost all of our childhood years, and it's definitely a place. We were here, we were at Monabarry before that for many, many years, which is a tea estate about an hour and a half up the road, actually the largest tea estate in Asia, and it's definitely a place. It's definitely a feeling of community, the whole tea. It's a very sort of old-fashioned environment, slightly military in certain ways, but it's definitely a feeling of community and tea planters clubs and stuff like that, a world that's really kind of vanished now. So it's definitely a feeling, it's definitely a place. I can remember our father talking, he taught us a lot about how tea is made, which is really interesting, about the process of making tea, the withering, the fermenting, the firing of the tea, and the sorting of it and all that. And every afternoon he'd be sitting here having a cup of tea, talking about, this is CTC tea, or this is Orthodox tea, or this has come from this particular estate, or that particular estate. So we were totally immersed in it, like Matthew says. Really interesting. Like Matthew says, the smell, it's a smell you can never forget. The smell of tea being made. It's just one of those smells that defines my life. But my mother, I think it was incredibly, she came to India in the late 1950s, early 1960s, to what was then a very remote part of India. It's very hard to get here, and it was a very closed community. So I think she was very brave. And then, all the tea planters' wives, they had a community where there was a huge amount of socialising going on, because there was nothing else. In those days, there were a lot of Scottish, English planters, and a lot of Indians as well, Indian planters. So it was a very mixed community, and I think they had a great social time. I think it was, party after party after party. Children's parties, that was the other thing, because a lot of them had children. So, organising of the communal children's parties. I can remember dozens of children's parties that you went to with, you know, all the friends we had, which were a mix of Europeans and Indians, and still in contact with some of these people today. You know, it's very interesting. Good tea, as you would expect. It brings back a whole way of life for me. You know, I love the taste of tea. I drink lots of tea in the UK, but it's not just the taste of the tea. It's the whole thing about the experience, the very verdant, lush green landscape it comes from, the Brahmaputra Valley. It brings that back. The steamy, hot weather. The monsoon out here, when the monsoon comes, how wet, and the whole garden will be flooded. And just the tropical nature, like Matthew says, the sounds, the smells, the thunderstorms. I've never seen thunderstorms like it. You know, the torrential rain. It's everything. It's not just the taste of the tea, it's the whole thing.
We always used to take tea at 4 o'clock. My father used to come back from the estate office, and we used to take the tea in the small room next to the dining room, which has now got the books and the paintings and the artifacts in there. And that was because that was the study. It had the only telephone at the bungalow, and it was one of only 2 air-conditioned rooms, which was my father's room, bedroom, and the study. And every afternoon, as it was getting dark, we used to have tea in there before later on my father would go to the veranda for drinking beer.
And that's actually a really interesting point, because back in those days there was hardly any communications. So that phone in there, I remember the phone number, it was Ballypara 27. And I can remember my father shouting down the phone, because it was so bad, the line. He'd be shouting, "Yes, yes, speaking, Ballypara 27. You know, it was absolutely hilarious, because it was such a poor phone system.
We staff, yeah, in the bungalow, big staff. There was probably about 13 or 14, and I suppose what I remember was all their kindness. They'd always take time to play with us or show us things, like in the garden, the Marleyberry garden. Gardeners would always help us. We'd make our own little seed beds and grow some things in the Marleyberry, and we were amazed because the seeds would come up after 2 or 3 days, not 2 weeks. I think one of my happiest memories is playing with some of the children who are of our age of the staff. We used to go around the garden with catapults or making fires or picking fruits from the garden. And there wasn't as many monkeys, so there was more fruit probably.
And I completely agree with that. And I remember, you know, the people we played with, some of whom we've been lucky enough to meet here, like Siren and, you know, and another chap that came yesterday, people that know us from back then.
Raju?
Raja.
Yes.
Raju.
Yes. Where is Raju? Hello.
Raja.
And also the kindness of the people was extraordinary. I mean, we did such interesting things. They made us, you know, bows and arrows. They made kites for us to fly. We were so well looked after. We had such an enchanted life here. It was absolutely amazing. And of course, all the fruit which you never got in England. You know, this exotic fruit that we never had back in the UK then. Fascinating. So we were children, so we didn't really get involved in some of the more adult things, but the adults were always doing outdoor activities. They were always fishing for Mahseer. Obviously this is called Wild Mahseer now. They were always having tennis parties. They were always rafting. Actually, in an hour's time we're going rafting too. They were always rafting on the river and you know, trekking, and lots of very interesting things were going on, you know, in terms of sports and outdoor activities. It was a very sort of physical outdoor life.
But as children as well, we were lucky enough to be able to go out. There was an ayah here, but often we just went out by ourselves. As I said, with the group of us, maybe 4 or 5 boys from, you know, boys of the staff and ourselves, and we'd all go out and play, often in the river, go through the tea estate, and we'd go down to the river fishing with nets, to catch small fish and things, and all day we were out basically, which suited us perfectly.
We were taught, for example, to catch fish with those nets that you throw that go in a big circle. I can remember learning how to do that. I can remember remember learning how to set fish traps to catch small fish. We spent time making little snacks and selling them in the bazaars to people, sort of entrepreneurial things for, you know, small children, sort of version of that. It was fascinating.
As for me, the lifestyle I chose later because it's put into me a sense of love of nature. I'm very keen at gardening, cooking, you know, and I think that comes down to all the food and the stuff that we grew here. It's very an outdoors life. So it's affected my life very much of what I enjoy doing. You know, walking, hiking, growing things. I have a garden back in England which I grow a lot of stuff. Fortunately I can't grow half the stuff that seems to grow here.
And for me, I would agree with all of that. I also love nature and you know, plants and animals. But for me, I ended up spending 20 years in the British military, and I think that's come from the tea, because it's actually a pseudo. There's many similarities. I mean, yesterday we went to Tackerbarry Club, and we went to see the manager's office there and the manager's house. And he was talking about how they move every 3 years. It's very much like a military posting cycle. The involvement of the wives and the families is a very military thing. And you know, I think that rubbed off on me and made me sort of predisposed to that kind of lifestyle. So I think the answer is yes, it did, and that's probably why I ended up, you know, joining the military. Oh gosh, that's an interesting question. I think the bungalow is very similar, actually. It's been incredibly tastefully decorated. It's very, very beautiful, and hardly anything has changed, apart from it's a lot nicer now than it was then. What is different, I think, is there's been, you know, it's got walls around it, which it never had before.
Yes, the bungalow is instantly recognisable as a planter's bungalow. There's very, very little has changed structurally inside. Some of the things I would say is different is I can turn on the hot tap and the hot water comes out,
Yes.
whereas before it was all done by firewood. So if you wanted a bath or something, there was a big palaver because the boiler had to be lit with the firewood, and the boiler was out the side of the house, and the water always used to be rusty. So the bath used to be, you couldn't see the bottom of the bath because the
I
water was
remember
all
that,
rusty,
yes. Yeah.
which was good. And of course you got the there's far more air conditioning here, but it's minor points. But yeah, it's almost unchanged, I would say. You know, it's so nice. It's not, you know, the brilliant thing, there is no TV.
Yes.
And that's a wonderful thing to me. Yeah.
The interior decoration and the way the bungalow is appointed is a lot nicer, because when we lived here, it was a sort of it was a company bungalow. It was an issued bungalow. You were told to go and live in the bungalow. You didn't really have the chance to decorate it yourself. This has been very tastefully done, so that is a much nicer, more luxurious environment. So that's one thing I think is better. What's missing? Not a lot, really. I don't think you could really fault this place. You know, you've got nature, you've got wonderful weather, you've got the interest in, you know, it's called the Botanical Arc, you know, Eastern Himalayas Botanical Arc. It's all about fruits and vegetables and trees and animals. That's wonderful. The bungalow's wonderful. I don't think there's a lot missing. I really don't. Well, actually, this bit here is particularly emotional for me, because this is where my father had the old wireless radio, which he used to listen to the news from the World Service in London. And you know, every evening around 6 o'clock, he'd come in here, wouldn't he, Matthew? And there'd be lots of tweaking of the dials and static. We had a big aerial on a huge couple of bamboo poles out there. The signal was very bad, but eventually it would come through, you know, this is London. And then we'd hear the news from London, which my father was absolutely religious about hearing the news from London. That to me is a defining memory. I mean, there's so many of these things, but that's one of them.
And I think I agree with that the wireless was a huge part of the life of my father and the planters. I think obviously pre-internet, newspapers were unavailable really. It was a huge part of their life, and there was no TV whatsoever. But I think one of the memories is we didn't come in this room often because it was sort of a very formal room. used to direct us, my father. But there was a tiger skin where the settees are, and I think when I did come in, I always used to play with the tiger and marvel at it. Which was quite interesting. It must have been shot by a planter or some...
Probably in about 1800 or something. So many things make us smile. I mean, just the noise in the morning when you wake up, the sound of the birds, all these different exotic calls going on, that definitely makes me smile. And the smell of tea in the tea factories makes me smile. The cooking is just amazing here. The food has been absolutely fantastic. That makes me smile. I'm giving you more than one because there's so many, you know. Yeah.
I think yes. I think one of the things, a small thing really, which sounds odd, was going in, arriving for the first time and being shown what was called a bottle corner, which was where the food from the voluntary corner, the cookhouse, was brought in before it was served. The pantry. And
Yes.
I can remember my mother, you know, being in charge of the pantry. She'd always discuss with the cook in the morning all the meals for the day, and help with all rations which were all kept in there. Things like butter was in the tin. But that was her reserve, really, all the food and the discussion with the cook as to what to have in the pantry. And that made me smile because I could see her.
It's actually being taken around a tea factory by my father, and you know, I was quite young, and just so interesting to see the complex process around how tea is made. You know, in the UK, people think, you know, they don't really think about how tea is made. They just see this black stuff and they drink it. But it's such a complex process involving plucking the leaf and withering it and fermenting it and firing it and sorting it and tasting it. That to me is something that is really the answer to your question. That's probably the strongest thing for me. Tea, and this is obviously a tea heritage bungalow. It's all about tea. You know, the ambassador car was parked on this bit. In those days, you used to drive around in a circle. It's like a roundabout. And the car would come in this way and be faced this way, and the current path is where the exit path was, but in the middle was all flowers, and it's a very sort of English Victorian type setup.
Was Aya, who was a lady called Calmly. She's a very small woman, and I think she came from Shillong, from the hills. But she was, ever so kind, and we spent most of the day with her helping. That was a huge thing. Also playing with the children of the staff was probably one of my favourite things. We always used to be a gang of boys doing whatever. We, you know, over the years you lose contact, which is why it's such a great thing. And it's sort of like, you know, it'll take time to process the whole visit here, I think. Several weeks actually.
Yes.
And actually we were friends with the actual workers in the bungalow as well. I still remember all their names. There was Hari Lal, you know, who's now sadly passed on. There was another chap called Biban. There was another chap called Indra. You know, there were all the people, the Malis that worked in the garden. We knew all their names. But they were sort of friends of ours, and they indulged us a lot. So it was lovely. It was a lovely life. There was two different sort of communities. There was the children of the workers in the bungalow, and the gardeners and people like that. We spent a huge amount of time there with them, didn't we, Matthew?
Yes.
Playing with them and what have you. And you know, as I said earlier, it's been lovely to meet some of them now, right? People that we remember from when we were 7 or 8 years old. And then the other community was the children of the planters that we knew. There were a number of planters that my parents were very fond of, Indians and British, and one particular family was called the Attles. And I still, you know, only probably about a year ago, I was doing a FaceTime call with Zara Attle, you know, who's one of the girls she was a little girl when we were little boys, talking about life in tea and stuff like that. So those are the people that I'm still in contact with. My parents' generation have generally all passed on, so it's now the children.
There's all of us
Together with Suren.
Yes.
And you know,
it's great to see him again.
it's been so wonderful for us to realise that Suren is now working in the very bungalow in which we were, you know, we used to play together, and
Yes.
it was just absolutely fun. I mean, it's actually been a complete shock to find that out. So it's absolutely. We were looking at some photographs the other day of us all together as small children. You you know, with our bikes and what have you. Absolutely brilliant.
बहुत अच्छा लगा। तो सोचा नहीं था सिर्फ के साथ आएगा बोल के, लेकिन काम भी सिला है। तो बोला था फोन करने बाद में कभी भी बात करता रहा, सब लोग के बाद डिफेक्ट साहब का बात और बाबा लोग का बातचीत कर रहा। उस दिन भी हम फोन किया, पहले का जैसे उसका ये दिमाग में सही नहीं है और फिर भी कोशिश किया हो। हम नाम बोलते बहुत समय तक बाद में उसका याद आता है और उससे बहुत कुछ जानकारी फिर भी लिया और सालों के लिए बोला कि हमको भी बहुत अच्छा लगा, एक बार आएगा बोल के बोला था साहब, आज आया है।
You wonder whether your mind has actually turned into something it's not, and I think also you do sort of think, you know, what will you find? Will you be disappointed? But having come back here, you know, we've had a wonderful time. Actually, it is the same. Yes, in my mind I thought the garden was this or that slightly, but you know, it's so instantly recognisable, you know, and I think it's something that will take time to think through really, but we've had such a great time here. Wonderful hosts, wonderful people that are helping us enjoy our stay here. You know, I can't think of anywhere being like this. It's unique.
I mean, the memories of an amazing way of life that you can't really find anywhere else in the world. Definitely, I will hope to return again. You know, it's been such an amazing thing to see it so well preserved. The memories of tea and the whole community of tea and how it's a closed community that is still going. It sounds like it's out of its time. It's a wonderful thing. And of course the wonderful weather and the wildlife, those are the things I will take. And the friendliness of the people. Everyone honestly has been so friendly in our visit. The service has been absolutely amazing. You just do not get this level of friendliness and service in Europe. So it's lovely.